now to reflect on a time when you felt calm. Just breathing in naturally, normally, and just reflecting on the time when you felt calm, peaceful. You can't think of a time, just imagine a place where you feel a sense of calmness and peacefulness. Just getting to that sort of calm state. Okay. So emotions code the meaning of events. The more emotional loaded the memory is, the stronger it is, and the harder it is to change. It's just the memory reconsolidation. So if we sort of come back to the here and now and sort of think about experiences in your life that have an impact on your reality. So an emotional experience. So the experience could be going to an interview and not working out the way you want to go. It could be a presentation. It could be, like you mentioned before, perhaps a time when you just went blank in a meeting. And these experiences have an impact on us. The more emotionally loaded the memory is, the harder it is to change. So let's look at some ways that we can work on. So to change our states. Our state is the state that we're in is instrumental and really, really important because it correlates and has a big association to the task in hand. It could be the event, a presentation. You're driving into a meeting and all of a sudden someone cuts you up on the road and you get into a state. Then you're at the meeting and being cut up on the road still affects you and you struggle with the meeting. Or perhaps you go into a presentation and you get a phone call, a negative phone call, and you struggle to get your sort of game head on, so to speak. Okay? Or just in general, throughout the day, you're sort of working and something's going on. So life's always going to have these challenges. There's always going to be things that are going to have an impact on us. So one thing to think about in changing our state, our appraisal we talked about this morning is very significant in how we feel. Our appraisal of a certain situation, how we appraise the situation. So, okay, if you're at work and there's redundancies, and normally the boss says hello to you, but on the morning of redundancies they walk straight past you. Your appraisal, what do you think your appraisal is going to be? What your appraisal might be, am I next? Your appraisal might be, what if I be made redundant, I can't find another job? And that impacts your emotion. You feel afraid, you feel nervous, anxious, and that obviously impacts your behavior and your physiology. Okay? So your appraisal is significant in the way we feel emotionally about certain situations. So you might want to just take a moment to understand how you're appraising a situation, what's going through your mind in any given situation, your thoughts, your beliefs. But equally in saying that people to change their state do a number of things. Okay? Some things are useful, some things aren't useful. Now the obvious ones are people drink excessive alcohol to change their state. So why do they drink a lot of alcohol for? So they know they get up in the morning, I'm going to feel any better. Well, because it changes their states, their perception of reality. So it could be a way, it could be a means to an end to suppress the feelings they're holding inside. A distraction. It could be just a social thing, but it could be done excessively for a number of reasons, but it's multifactorial. But the things that people do to change their state. It could be people take substances to change their state. Okay? There's no way of changing their state. And these aren't things I would advise. They're not good in that respect, unless obviously they're done in a control and you've got a medical prescription to do that for a medical supervisor. But as a general rule, it's probably not a good idea, I would think, in my opinion. Sometimes people do social media to change their state. Maybe you wake up in the morning or in the evening, you decide I'm going to put a post on social media to get like. People like, they put the like button, don't they? So you're thinking, okay, I feel good. So you see people, to change their state, they get that validation, unvalidated, and you put a post on the social media and you get one person, 10 people, maybe 1 million people, 1,000 people liking it, and you feel good for that instant. And every now and again you check the phone to see if somebody else has liked the post. And then someone who normally likes it doesn't like the post, and you're worried. You change state again. Why haven't they liked what I do? They don't like me no more. So you've got this constant appraisal of a certain situation. And that has a really big impact in the way we feel. But we can break that state and look at ways. Some of the ways, one thing you can do is breathing. Breathing is really useful. Okay, well, you need to breathe. If you don't breathe, you're in trouble. Now, one thing to do is practice your breathing for your state. So where do you breathe? You breathe deeper. So you just place your hands on your tummy if you don't mind, and just practice breathing deeper. And as you practice breathing deeper, you calm the nervous system down. Okay? Because people who feel, say someone feels mildly anxious about situation, appraisal, where do you think they'll breathe? Which part of their anatomy do you think they'll breathe from? Yeah, exactly, from here. And it'll be fast and shallow. And what message is sent to the brain? To the brain, it sends a message that I'm in danger. Because the mind and body being one system, breathing shallow and fast, I'm in danger, and they start to hyperventilate. And it's a cycle, vicious cycle in one respect. So it would make a lot of sense to just breathe deeper, to calm the nervous system down. To calm the nervous system down and say everything's okay. Because when you fall asleep at night, the body knows what to do. You breathe deeper, your heart rate goes down, your blood pressure drops. As a general rule, you breathe deeper and practice your breathing till it becomes unconscious and unconscious competence. Because if you've been breathing high for so long, then it's like driving in a certain way for so long. It's like riding a bike a certain way for so long. It's like doing anything you do in a certain way for so long. It's this sort of retraining the mind. So breathing, your physiology impacts your state as well. Okay, so probably the quickest way to change for biochemical changes in the brain could be your physiology. Because if you sit like this for, say, a minute, and just try to experiment, you sort of sit like this, sit down for, say, half a minute, if you're okay doing it. If you sit in a slump position, how do you start to feel? Slowly but surely, how do you begin to feel? You start to feel the way that position you're sitting would dictate your feel. So you probably start to feel a bit down.
Negative.
Precisely. Possibly. But if you adopt a different postural position, if you sort of jump in the air on motivational seminars and sing and that sort of stuff, you're going to alter your states. Now, I'm not suggesting that every morning what you do before work, you sort of do star jumps and punch the air, but your physiology changes it. So for many years, me working with football teams, I would always advise them when they sort of walk out in the tunnel, with their back straight, look forward, because if nothing else, it alters their state. It also sends a message to the other team that, we mean business here, so to speak, So that's a sort of important thing. So even during the game, I told my players, under no circumstances, you to sort of to put your hands on your knees and go down, because it's going to alter your state, but also the opposition thinks that you're tired too. So, put your hands behind your head and breathe, and open your airways, rather than close your airways. Your state is key. So breathing and physiology are two ways to alter your state. Okay. Another thing too is, when emotion is concerned, we're never really told or educated in academia about emotions, and emotions are, in one respect, a bit like say physiological pain, in the sense they're telling you something. If you're uncomfortable about something, it's a knock on the door. It's like knocking the door. Say if you cut yourself, generally speaking, you'll feel pain. If you stub your toe, you'll feel pain. You fall over, you feel pain, and there's a good reason for that, because it's your brain getting a message saying things aren't right here. So emotion as well is useful. So rather than sometimes try and suppress the emotion like a bottle of fizzy pop and holding it down, actually recognizing it, okay, and being aware of it is a good place to start. I think it's useful to be able to be more aware of the emotion. So what I mean by that, so think of a mildly uncomfortable situation in your own experience, and that could have been at work, and maybe you have a disagreement with the boss at work, or maybe at home, have disagreement, or maybe just in general you get overwhelmed doing something. So I'm going to guide you through like an acronym, which is quite useful, and we're going to do a little bit of an exercise for you to knock on the door, to sort of see what's the emotion telling me. So perhaps if it's easy to close your eyes, you can do. If you're not comfortable closing your eyes, it might be an idea to just put a daydream stare in the horizon and think of a situation and just recognize the feeling and recognize the emotion, okay, whatever that feeling is, and see it as a knock on the door, a bit like trick or treat when they're knocking on the door and you sort of open the door and sort of recognize the emotion without putting a label to it at this moment in time. Just recognize it and accept it's there. I don't mean accept as in, okay, you can't change it. I mean accept as in, it's there for a reason. It's not acquiescence and accepting and that's the end of that. And accept it's there, almost like welcome it. And perhaps you can see and get the emotion to pull up a chair and sit in front of you and dissociate from it. And as you dissociate from the emotion and it's in front of you, it could be anger, frustration, overwhelm, just talk to it. Okay? In a dialogue, investigate. What's it telling you? Okay, ask questions. What is this emotion telling me? What am I feeling? How come am I feeling this way? What's going on? Okay, and as you do that, just imagine draining the colours out and pushing the chair back so it's far away as a postage stamp. Turn the sounds down. And now reappraise the situation, a new way of looking at it. So put a new perspective on it. So you might be personalising it, you might be magnifying it, you might be making it more than what it is, or it might be what it is. And what you can control, you can, what you can't control, let go. So look at new ways of looking at the situation, new perspective. You've had challenges in the past and you've overcome them, and there's no reason why you can't overcome challenges in the future. Okay? And now in your own time, in your own pace, you can come back to the here and now. So it's another useful process you can do. It's an acronym that I can send to you, which recognizes, accepts, investigates the new ways of looking at the emotion, which is a really, really useful way. But I'll send you a template and I'll sort of modify a variation that someone put together and put a bit of a hypnotic spin on it as well. But they're key things you can do. Breathing, physiology for state, and recognize the emotion. Now we'll look at NLP anchoring to get in the zone. So being in the right frame of mind at the right time. So you could wake up in the morning and have a disagreement with a partner, or you could fall out at work, or you could be cut up on the motorway, and then you struggle to get into that mindset, the right state at the right time. Okay, if you're in a meeting at work and you're still stewing over the car cutting you up, is that a good state to be in? Probably not. Okay, if you've got to do a presentation and you are thinking about what happened a few days earlier, maybe you had a bad experience, is that a good state to be in? Probably not. So if you're going out to big sporting events, it's about being in the right state at the right time. Okay, big performers have got the capability to be in the right state at the right time. People who do well have got that ability to be in the right state at the right time, because we know how influential the state is on our behaviour. Because you know if you're in a good state, in a good place, you're going to behave and react differently to if you're in a negative state. So if the boss at work is walking around and the redundancy is being made, if you're in a good state, you're going to react differently to if you're in a negative state, behaviourally, much different. So if the person you see at lunchtime walks straight past you and you've known them for years and you think they've ignored you, if you're in a bad place when you see that person, you're going to react differently than what you would do in a good place. If you're in a good place, you're going to text them back saying, are you okay? If you're in a bad place, you'll probably text them back saying, why are you ignoring me, so-and-so. So a lot of it is a reflection of your projection. That's why, for me, I've learned in my infinite wisdom that a lot of people project their own. It's a bit Jungian. Perception is projection. So the person says to you, I thought this. Well, actually, I didn't think that. This is what I thought. Okay? I might have someone email me saying, you know what, I tried to email you a couple of times, you didn't respond. I thought you were ignoring. And the idea is I might not have been online, or possibly I might not have got the email. Or I might have sent you an email back, but it's gone into your spam folder or blocked by your firewall. So I'm thinking logically here, and the other person could be thinking, okay, in terms of worst scenario. But they're projecting their own baggage, because that's probably something that they would do and they would think. So I don't personalise it. And that's when I deliver training for customer service. I tell them, you know what, if someone's sort of on the other end of the phone, they're projecting the worst scenario and putting it onto you, then throw it away. It's just a projection of self. They're seeing themselves in the mirror, so to speak. So, perception, projection. So it's a big, big thing. Huge in respect to your belief is going to affect the way the other person behaves too. So if you believe in your students, you project that they can achieve, then they probably more than likely will achieve more than they would have achieved otherwise. So to be in the right state is key. And think about a time that you were in the zone. Think about a time in your life that you were in that sort of zone, that flow, that optimal. It could have been sport, could have been doing a dissertation, could have been just doing something you really enjoy doing, but you were in that zone. And perhaps if it's okay to close your eyes again, you can sort of reflect on the time you were in that zone. You're in that sort of flow, where time literally slowed down. And breathe, and as you breathe, you notice your heartbeat from where you're breathing, and you can hear the clock in the background, fully associated with the time you're in the zone. Okay, and really experience it like it's the here and now. Okay, and just connect to that. And now, in your own time, in your own pace, if you come back to the here and now, if you want to come back, you're going to stay where you are, you can stay there. But we prefer to come back. So think of emotions you enjoy experiencing. What are some emotions you enjoy experiencing? Well, you might enjoy experiencing love, joy, happiness. But the brain being the way the brain is, if you don't proactively work on it, the general rule, the general consensus is the brain system. The brain is designed to keep you alive. Aversion being what's dangerous. So, okay, human beings, we're storytelling species where in years gone by, if you went to a different town, the first thing you do when you got back is not say the greenery, the scenery, you'd come back and say the dangers to keep the species alive. Now, if people tell you their stories, they'll tell you their narrative, their cognitive distortion goes down their story. If you just care to listen to people, you'll sort of hear what they've got to say. And that obviously can be challenged too. But the point being is that, okay, if you leave the brain to do what the brain does best, you're probably not going to experience certain things or feelings as much as one can do, because you have the same feeling primarily, the way primal ancestors were faced with tigers and dinosaurs and other tribes, and it's those sort of same feelings that we've sort of inherited from them when we're faced with modern day stress. So an interview, presentation, meeting, you have the same stress response as the ancestors had when they were faced with the tigers and the lions, and the same. Adrenaline, cortisol. And cortisol in high dosage is not good. In small dosage, it's okay. You get up in the morning, you crack on. In high dosage, all the evidence suggests that it's not good at all. Chronic stress is not good. It leads to a number of things. The research suggests otherwise. So learning to experience feelings is a good thing to do. So you can control your emotional state to the point that, okay, the brain's implicit. You might see a colour, someone's face reminds you of somebody else. You might see or hear there's made redundancies, and that sort of sparks a feeling. You might see someone who looks similar to an ex-partner, that sparks a feeling. You might hear someone say something that your parents used to say to you when you're 5-year-old, that sparks a feeling. You might drive past your old school. All these things. So we sort of control emotional state as much as one can do. We know life being the way it is, there's the pressures in life, it's not easy. There's external causes of stress, life changes, relationship difficulties, being busy, all these things, internal things, our self-talk, expectations, distortions, and we have the fight, flight, freeze response, and that's a normal reaction, fight, flight, freeze. A little bit like when you're driving and you get cut up on the motorway, your first reaction on the motorway is not, by the way, is the person racing their wife to hospital. The first reaction is a sniffing reaction, that gap between impulse and action. Okay, so it might be an idea before you answer a question to buy time. You get an email coming in, maybe I don't want to reply straight away. If it's something you've got to speak logically, you get a text coming in. When I train people like football managers and people who speak a lot in the public, I tell them to buy that 6-second gap between impulse and action, so perhaps they can sort of have a drink handy before they answer the question. And just have a drink. It's not vodka to drink, but it buys them that limbic response. It goes to the front part of the brain. The front part of the brain gets hijacked, by the way, under extreme stress. We go to time. That's why people sometimes behave, and don't take my word for it, go to a town on Saturday evening, any town centre, and you'll see people behaving like, primal, so to speak. Okay, you'll see it. And because a lot of them nuance their frontal cortex by excessive alcohol, and God knows what else they take. But equally, we know that people do things they wouldn't normally do. And the stress is the same. Not a good thing. So, that tennis match between the primal brain and the modern brain, the part of the brain that makes us human. You hear a big bang in the kitchen tonight at 1 a.m, and immediately you get up and think, wow, someone broken in. And as you're walking down the stairs, it goes to the frontal part of the brain. You think, well, I left the dishes on the edge. Could have been that. Logically, you go down. It's sort of tennis match. Then you sort of see the dishes on the floor, and the two come in agreement. Cortisol level is going to be high for a few hours afterwards. But the point being is that there's a bit of a tennis match going on. So the people who tend to do well in life generally are the ones who can process things logically, who can access a variety of states. Because if you end up in a situation where you've got children and you end up arguing with them, it's not a good idea. Okay, has anyone got children in the group or been around children? Okay, have you ever had an argument with them, a 2-year-old who wants those sweets? You're at the shop, I want those sweets. No, you can't have them. I want them. No, you can't have them. And then a big scene breaks out. Then you find yourself behaving like a 2-year-old, as you do, and everyone's like looking over thinking. So, we still have that spiral. But there's a gap between impulse and action. It's quite a useful thing to do, but in this context, think about times you underachieved. And think, if I only was in a better state, if I only went to that interview in a better state, if I only managed my emotion better. So I get a call one time, this woman phones me up saying my husband's in a bit of a state at the moment. What's the problem? He's got to do a military test to get the job, the promotion. Okay, how can I help? He's really overwhelmed, really, really worried about this job, not getting it. So I said, okay, why hasn't he phoned me? Buy into what you do. It was his problem, not mine. I'm not going for the test. He's going for the test. He doesn't buy into what I do. Then do what he does. But he's worried. He'll try. So I said, well, tell him to give me a call. I'd book a session in with him, and he comes along. He said, I've got a few days to get my mindset in the right place. got his sort of test, and the test involved him running 1.5 miles and a certain time frame, which he could do. He could do all that, the press-ups, the test he's got to do. The issue is his appraisal. His appraisal was, I get this promotion, I might get extra money to pay for this, to do that and the other. And he was getting more overwhelmed. Really, really overwhelmed. And think of your own appraisal situations and see it clearly. And then what we did, one of the techniques we did, because he'd get to about halfway through the test when he used to do the practice run, and he'd panic and get really overwhelmed. So I worked with him closely, and we did rehearsal after rehearsal, but also we did an anchor. So I couldn't train him physically at that point. It was too dangerous because 3-4 days before, you could do a hamstring, you could do whatever. There's not much we can change physiologically. So I did what we had. So we do an anchor, and I said, okay, a cue to connect to an emotional state, to create a state. So whenever he got to, say, when he got to that point where he sensed overwhelmed, he fired the anchor, pressed his anchor, creating a state and linking to kinesthetic action. And that really made a huge difference for him, in the sense that I texted him on that Monday when he was meant to go for the test. He goes, the bad news is that the test got cancelled. So they went again Tuesday. I texted him back Tuesday, how'd you get on? He goes, great news, I smashed it. And I'm not saying it was down to me, but all I'm saying, all the time I've been doing this, state is key. Okay? Big thing. So you underachieved. You could have done it, but you didn't feel awesome at the time. There's nothing worse than underperforming, by the way. I don't mind if I'm playing a sport or doing something and I do my best. I'm disappointed if I lose. I hold my hands up, not good enough. But when you underperform, that's the most horrible thing, I think. But think about things you've got coming up. Presentations, interviews, meetings, exams, sports, maybe just general anxiety. Okay, just mood, generally you drift off into these negative mindsets, more self-aware. And think about what you could do with being in the right state at the right time. Okay? And this doesn't have to just be for these, by the way. The guy I was working one time, and he had served in the armed forces, and I wasn't working with him directly for what he asked me to work with. I was doing some other work. I was doing some training for the Air Force at the time, but this guy came up to me saying that one of the issues he's got is that he sort of gets angry around these children at times, and he responds in a way he doesn't like responding. But this ran a bit deeper based on some of his experiences. And one of the things I worked on him, because he knew he had an issue, because there were times that, he'd speak to his 3-year-old in a certain way and he regretted it afterwards, but obviously there's a point that something sparked him off. But the point being is that to sort of break that state. So I sort of worked with him and said, okay, whenever you're in a situation where you feel that way, we got like a elastic band, just like a thought stopping technique, but we linked that to an emotion. So you link that to not just thought stopping as in my thoughts are going to stop in their tracks, by doing that, sort of recalibrating to a state. Okay, so before we spoke, and breathing, and then speak. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. So, okay, we can reflect on times you were happy, confident. Okay, because in an interview, in a presentation, in sport, your confidence level is going to be instrumental. All things being equal, remember there's confidence. Okay, there's no point being confident flying a plane if you're not a pilot. Okay, there's no point being confident doing brain surgery, not a brain surgeon. There's no point. It says competence, but most people have got the competence, they just lack the confidence because they've been told for many years what they can't do rather than what they can do. Because you're in a system that tells you that, okay, all throughout your life you're graded and you focus on what you got wrong rather than what you got right. Increase that. And that's going to demoralize anybody's confidence. You spend a lifetime in a system that tells you what you got wrong all the time and how wrong you are. It's not really damn good, is it, for your confidence growing up? Okay, and then you got people around you too, as well. But another story for another day. So I think your most redorsal states, confidence, calm, the most resourceful states that you're in. Okay, the most resourceful states that you're in. Okay, it's about getting into the states. Now we talked earlier about personality traits. We talked about, okay, introvert, extrovert. You would think if you're hiring somebody, this is where these psychometric tests can go wrong, horribly wrong, because you would think that someone who's extrovert would be a better presenter than someone who's introvert. You think immediately, if you're hiring, I'll hire the extrovert. But you could be making a big mistake, because a lot of presenters and lecturers are actually introverts. They'd probably much rather do the research, but if they've got to get out there, they can do it really, really well. I know, speaking from my own experience, I'm more of an introverted character, but equally in saying that, if I get myself in the state, I can deliver. When people say to me, well, you're different on stage. When I do the big seminars to what you are in person, but I'm quite laid back person, no different. It's just, the key thing is really that it's about your state. Being on that state. You go on radio, I get into a state. A session, I go into a state that's appropriate for that situation, which is key. The more you work it, the better it is. So I think a good emotional state for an interview could be calm, presentation, could be confident, a meeting could be both, an event coming up, sporting event. So it's about the appropriate state at the right time. Okay? Focus is key. There's a video actually you'll see me do, if you haven't already seen it before, I can show you after the break. There's a video, and that video is when I'm working with a player, I develop an anchor with him, and the anchor is what he does, the lad. He takes a free kick and he taps his foot on the floor, and the connection is the tap on the floor to being confident. Okay, at that point there he gets a chance to take a free kick and he scores the goal. I'm not putting down him scoring the goal to what the work I did with him, but I'm sure he did no harm. But I would work, and I've done with footballers in the past, the present, is they create a state. So if they take a free kick, it could be to tap the foot on the floor, and that gets you to a state. Because in football you've got things that are going through your mind, the crowd, the appraisal of winning, because what's pressure anyway? It's what you place on yourself. So all these things are buzzing through your head, and the key thing is to put all that to one side and just focus on the task in hand. Okay, the best chance to achieve. So an anchor is a bit like a song where if you listen to a song, it takes you back to a certain time. Who's had that before, where you listen to a song and you go back, and it could be a holiday, it could be a time you're with somebody, so you kind of drift away as you do in that situation. You listen to a tune and it takes you back to an experience in your life. Okay, so you've got the neurological link between that peak intense state and the application of a specific stimulus. So you've got a neurological link. So, okay, you could say, if you heard a tune, you were having a buzzing time, you're in Ibiza somewhere, and chilling out by the beach, and the people who do the shows, and the ones who do the shows on the beach, whatever, and you're in a really, really state, and you hear the same song, and you're sitting in the office, it sort of takes you back there. But equally, that if you broke up in a relationship and the song was playing, it might influence your state as well. So the peak intense state, and then you apply that stimulus, okay, the central stimulus. Okay, a little bit different, by the way, but anyone ever come across the Pavlov dog? Okay, so the Pavlov dog, which was built on Little Albert was built on Pavlov dog, where they got the Little Albert was a pseudium, and the pseudium was for a 9-month-old who had no known fears or phobias. And basically what they did, the Watson-Rain experiment, they would give him like a fluffy white rabbit, or rat I think it was, and then behind him they'd ring a bell. He had a loud noise, and his only fear was loud noise and falling, and then ring a loud noise. You couldn't do that experiment now, so back I think in 1912, it wouldn't be past ethical standards, so you wouldn't get that through ethical standards for our people who are involved in ethical standards. But the point being is that he then sees a rat, a white rabbit, and becomes afraid of it. So he connects the two together. So Pavlov was the dog. So the dog naturally salivates when food is there, the smell of food. Ring the bell, there's no salivation. But then you ring the bell and put food out, the dog connects the two together. And then you just ring the bell and the dog salivates. The ring of the bell. That's a little bit slightly different. to the anchoring process we're going to cover, but there is a foundation there. But what I would say too is that the only sense that goes straight to the limbic system is smell. Smell is the only sense that goes straight to your limbic system. Okay, and think about it. Whenever you see advertisements on perfume and fragrance, they tend to advertise it with, you get these sort of attractive people in the eyes of corporation and these raunchy names, and it's the only sense. And you'll know, you might reflect on someone you in a relationship with years ago, and you smell the same smell, and it sort of reflect on them. Okay, or perhaps your partner wears a certain type of aftershave of perfume, and then maybe one of you, but perhaps your partner wears it. Then all of a sudden your daughter decides to start wearing the same one, and probably not, Then you have like that sort of reflection, or you see someone else has the same one, and sort of the mindset changes. But on another note as well too, you see in commercials to the point that the example I use is one time I was sort of walking the streets of London after one of those big seminars that I do, and some of you have been to, and I was like walking the streets of London and I see the commercial, and the commercial is I didn't know what was going on, big screen in London, and I've seen a commercial coming on. It was quite fascinating because all I see was this guy who had, this sort of perfect physique, abdominals and perfect physique, so to speak, and he's being hoisted on this rod, and all of a sudden, all you hear was a window. Wasn't you hear like this 11:30, and it was like the advert was for a specific drink, and the drink was, I think, if memory serves me correct, it might have been Coke, but I stand corrected. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. But the point being is that the idea behind the advert, and it goes on a lot of advertisements, is to create an arousal state amongst the viewers. But the 11:30 that goes on is like an anchor. So the women wake up next day not knowing why they want a drink, but they want that drink because they've got an association. You're not buying the drink. It probably doesn't taste great. And if I advertise it, I would have advertised like this. I would have said, here you go, sugar, chemicals. Would you pay £1.50 for that? You tell me where to go. But they use a conditioning response, and the reality is the 11:30. And if you watch the ad again, the window cleaner ad, if you're old enough to remember it, remember that window cleaner ad? It's a classic one. So how much was it? 11:30, 11:30, 11:30, 11:30. Then Brendan in the back there wakes up at 11:30. I want that Diet Coke. I don't know why I want it.
It's nothing to do with the sexy honk that's true.
Well, precisely. It's true. It's true with that, isn't it? Yeah, and then it sets the precedent for your window cleaner. He turns up and you go and say, well, you don't look like that. I want a new window cleaner. I want one of those.
It made it more powerful because that was like the first anti-sexism.
Well, yeah, I mean...
It coincided with the sort of awareness of boobs being advertised.
Okay, that's interesting. I have no idea.
It was reverse psychology.
Okay, oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, no, that's.
Saying that women can like men just as much
exactly,
as men
yeah.
like women.
Yeah. Well, biology is biology, so
Yeah.
But and it's an example. I've worked with many sports people. Person I was working with, I shan't reveal the name. She was in the course, and she did the show jumping, and she said it had a big impact on her because once you jump over certain hurdles, if you hit the hurdle, what do you think is going through your mind? You think, oh damn, But obviously, the key, you've got to focus on the next hurdle, be in the right state. So if you're focusing on the hurdle you've hit, and you're in a negative state, the score I'm going to get, it's like a spiral of dominoes, and we worked on that, and see the dressage. She emails me back saying, stacking the anchors on my horse after a successful dressage test, really helpful. So, it's not the only person I've worked with in sport. I'm not putting her success as a kinesthetic one down to me. I'm just saying that it is what it is. But we know advertisers do it all the time. Logos. You associate the logos. I'm sure you recognize some of these. Okay. And you think about it, sometimes the brand, you look at the brand logo. So interestingly enough, you might decide to buy a certain car that's dearer, that's built from the same manufacturer, only because of the logo. See, in this situation, I believe, and I stand corrected, that there's a car that was made by Volkswagen Skoda, same manufacturer by the way, same sort of specification. The only difference was, for the greater good, was just the logo. I stand corrected, but this is my information. But people paid more for that than what they paid for that. So branding is big. Okay, association is huge. So anchoring is useful in this context to act as a past resourceful state and link it, being able to link a resourceful state to the present and future whenever you need it, which is a useful thing to do. Examples of anchors, logos, facial expressions. You know, if someone looks at you a certain way, it triggers off a feeling. The weather, traffic, signs, gestures. They're all examples of logos, of anchors, visual ones. I've had football players I've worked with, for example, and sports people who they use visual logos, but also when they get to a certain ground, the sign of the ground triggers a certain feeling. And you'll see, like in certain football grounds, when you walk through the tunnel, they put all their stuff that they've won, and you know, a lot of it sort of to psych the opposition out. Okay, auditory words. So maybe someone speaks in a certain way, a certain tone, and it triggers a feeling, a jingle, an accent. So maybe you went on a holiday in France and you hear a French person speak, you sort of regress back to the south of France. A ringtone. Maybe your mobile phone ringtone takes you back to the debt collectors. Okay, music, sound of familiar voices. So you know what it's like when you're abroad sometimes and you hear a familiar voice, an accent, and you sort of feel a sense of soothing if you're under any distress, and oh great, someone can speak to this, you know, type thing. Kinesthetic, clothing, exercise, and touch. And sometimes you'll see, and people have recorded me when I'm working with my athletes, I'll see that I deliberately get them to stay. Well, I'm doing it for their best interest. So before they do a race or an event, I'll sort of go up to them and sort of tap my shoulder, and I get permission to do that first of all, by the way. No, I don't. That's sort of nonsense. But if you are going to do it for a one-to-one session, do get permission to start touching people, because things have changed in accordance to that too. But I'll have an athlete that sort of tap my shoulder, and it's okay, and really have a past confident experience and getting to stay. It's quite useful to do that. So maybe in training, I'll sort of tap shoulder, then before a big event, do that. The huddle being a big one too. Taste as well, an anchor. So you might eat a paella that reminds you back of being in Spain. You might drink a bottle of wine, and you're certainly anchored then. You'll be anchored for a long time. Okay, smell as well. I said smell is the only sense that goes straight to the limbic system. Okay, so it could be the hospital smell, the bread smell, freshly mown grass. So the key is really, we're going to do the practice after break, is the intensity experience. That's really important, to create a really intense experience. They're the key tips. The timing is key when you're setting it. So you go into state, and the timing of when you associate the stimulus, okay, that is key. Because if I'm just doing it here, if I really feel it, then just like that song I mentioned, you hear the song and you're in that sort of zone, and automatically links two together. The key is getting to a peak state, and if you're going to do a kinesthetic anchor, pressing it when you're in a peak state. Okay, the recreation, and think about time you're in a really peak state. Okay, really important, the peak state, like the tapping of the foot, which is key. The replication of the stimulus, and the appropriate of the stimulus too, and also the action. Okay, is it appropriate? So I was with a girl one time, and she had severe anxiety, and she'd sort of spent a long time social avoidance. She'd worked with many people before she worked with me, and I felt that, having worked with me for a few weeks, if she could go out for the first time in a number of years, and there was a wedding coming up, and I said, you know what, if we can break that barrier, this starts to build belief, she can get back outside again. And so I said to her, we work on anchor as well as many other things too, but the anchor was instrumental for her. But when we talk about the applicability of the anchor itself, I said every time you feel overwhelmed at the table around you, feel overwhelmed, then connect to your anchor. And our anchor was a fist. So you don't really want to make a fist at people at a wedding table, but that's what worked for her. So it's going to be applicable. So I have a number of anchors. When I do the radio, I do my presentations, I have different anchors. I buy sometimes like a wristband if I go somewhere. So if I go, for example, to like a course I've enjoyed, a turn your opposite, man, or something like that. Something nice I've really enjoyed a bit.
What do you use when you're on radio? Because I can do it pinching it.
Well, you have to pay me for that. What do I use on radio? To be fair, you know, as a general rule on radio, I just go. Before I go on, I have like 5 minutes before I go on radio, and I just sort of get into state. I reflect on things. I have visual anchors. I have kinesthetic anchors as well. And now and again, if I'm doing talk radio too, if someone phones in and hits my limbic system in terms of something they say, derails me, then I'm like, bang, get on it, man. Get on it again. You know, focus. So I have kinesthetic anchors. Also on radio too, I have a specific clothes I'll wear that work for me. Colours as well too is really useful. So I'll cover every base, absolutely. But I can speak to you in more detail if you want, Brenda. I can sort of do that, which is key. The number of times is key. How often you do, and the repetition. So repetition can substitute for intensity. If every day, for example, you walk into the office and someone taps you on the shoulder and says, "Isn't it a wonderful day?" and eventually it's going to sort of start to stack. I would say that the intensity is probably more powerful than the repetition, how many often you do it. But in saying that, if someone says you're doing a great job, then anchor it. You know, when Brenda sends me an email saying what a great course it was that she'd been on, then I just anchor that and I print that off. Because there's plenty of people who are going to tell you negative stuff about you. So why not say praise? Just delete the rest. Just delete it. You know, treat it as a compliment. If someone gives you any sort of criticism or negativity, because they're actually thinking about it in that way. But the key thing is keep stacking it. So, you know, one time I did the football session and everyone sort of stood up and clapped at my session. And I just anchored it. Really did anchor it. So everyone, like, my session was pretty unique and different. If I do like big events and speak at the events and at the end people clap, just anchor it. I'm not a natural speaker, ironically. For me it took a lot of work to become a speaker. But I speak around the world, I've done for many years now. I was never a natural speaker. I was the sort of person who could compete as an athlete in front of people. Okay, not a problem, but put me in a room, people close to me was like, oh, in my space, man. But the point being is that I had to speak for a living because I'm a lecturer as well as presenter. I had to work on it, and a lot of it comes down to state. I joined a speaking group. I'm not on commission Toastmasters, but they really helped me a lot because you could go out there in a safe environment and speak. I'm still there now, but the key is state. Really important, especially if you're not a natural extrovert who likes the sort of, type thing. So really, I'm thinking, okay, how can I convey this information in the best possible way? Key. So get in the zone. So we're going to really focus on that after the break, which will be quite useful, I think, for us to do. But think about things you've got coming up, by the way. Think about things you've got coming up yourself, and what sort of state would be useful to be in. Because we're going to practice a technique. I'm going to guide you through a technique. Actually, what I'll do, before we break for lunch, we'll do a group. We'll do a group one before we break for lunch, and then after we break for lunch, I'll do a really quick 5-minute group one, and then that'll embed the learning after the break. We'll do.
Just a quick one on that.
Yeah.
When you did the training session and they applauded, did you anchor it straight away?
I did. Yeah, that's the best. That's a good question, actually. It's the earlier you do it, the better. Yeah, absolutely. But equally, what you could do if you didn't do it straight away, do in vivo. You imagine going back to the experience, reliving it, and then connect the two together. That's the next best thing. Ideally, you do it at a time when it's raw. But if you haven't done it when it's raw, then go back and re-experience it.
Did you actually do it while they were applauding?
Yeah, I did do. Yeah, just kind of like that. Yeah, absolutely. I sort of like, and I do whenever I do the big seminar, the ones I've been to at the end when they applaud, just sort of just get to that sort of state, and just because it just gets stronger all the time. That's the sort of key because you're on it, and you're on the stage, and people say that. I mean, I think the seminar that you came along that time, for no fault of my own, the organisers put me in an old warehouse. It was overbooked. On top of everything else, on top of being overbooked and being in another warehouse, opposite to where I was speaking was like a panel beating place. You could literally smell the damn spray from the other side. It couldn't have been, And I turned up there, I couldn't even damn find the place. And I got there, I thought, is this some sort of joke? It was an old new rave place, and I thought, wow. And I got people walking in there, but you just got to be on it. Control what I can. So I get myself in state. People said afterwards, how did you manage to do well? Well, I blocked it out. Just focus on state. Yeah, I sent an email afterwards to sort of clarify what had gone on. But at the point, you just got to focus on what you're doing. That's just the way it is. So you sort of, the key thing we're going to do after the break, I'm sort of mindful of our lunch time, but we're going to choose states to anchor and going to, as you mentioned there, if you don't do it at that point, then relive it as much as one can, the next best option. And bear in mind too, by the way, you'll see a lot of this goes on when you see people speak. Ever watch politicians speak, you'll see them do a lot of spatial anchoring. What we mean by spatial anchoring, they'll kind of point towards the other dude and say how horrible he is, so you kind of associate that. So be careful when you're in a situation where people try and spatially anchor you, dissociate from it straight away. And then what they'll do, a lot of politicians, they'll point towards themselves and say how great and wonderful they are. You know, I'm such a great, wonderful person, and he or she's, and that's spatial anchoring. And you can do spatial anchoring as well too, which is really useful too.
Do they know they're doing it? Are they trained to do that?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
for sure, definitely. You're not sort of born to, they're trained. It's powerful stuff because you associate spatially. And a lot of the time they talk about values, and values are very strong, aren't they? Emotional drivers. So they'll talk about people's values, what people want, you know, better healthcare, more money, and just watch the next time you see this, and you'll see, and newsreaders too. They'll point to some country somewhere. See, you watch the news in one country, it's a different perspective to another country. Sometimes I don't watch the news very often, but when I do, I might watch Russian television, RT, and then I might watch the BBC, and you see a whole different paradigm completely, depending on which perspective you watch it. But equally, you'll see the newsreaders too. They'll put the screen on there and point to the screen, and you know, and you start. But that's another story for another day. But spatial anchors are really important too. They're useful. They're really key. But when I used to work in young offenders, what we would do is like make a point of painting the walls a more moderate colour. Was you know, because colour is going to impact on people, like light blue, unless obviously they've had experience light blue. But the point being is it's a more neutral colour than say red, for example. We can talk about it as we go along. So you choose a state, then you get them to listen to the state, to really feel it. So think of a time you felt really confident, determined, or calm, and just really connect to it. If it's easy to close your eyes, you can do. It's entirely, you feel it. You ask the client to relive the experience, or at least 3 times. Okay, when they've accessed the state. That's the first step. They can't remember a time, then imagine what it would be like to feel confident speaking, motivated interviewing, calm in a meeting. Okay, what it would be like to create that. Okay, it's really important. Okay, that's the right state for the right time, and get them to relax their eyes closed, and imagine going back to that time when they felt that way, and really feel it. The time they felt calm, focused, relaxed, and really connect to it, so they can see themselves like watching a screen. As they see themselves like watching a screen, any colours, sounds, noises, get them to really focus on how they feel at the time or felt at the time, and connect to that. Then step in the screen and really feel it. And then on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being high, when they get to about 9, that's when you really want to connect the anchor for about 3 to 5 seconds. Okay, and start to connect the two together. And just repeat the process 3 or 4 times. So example, okay, there's a cricket player I was working with. Every time he gets, say, 40 runs, he'd find a way to get himself out. So we worked on an anchor. And the anchor was, imagine you coming out the bats in the state you're in when you first walk out. And whenever you get to, say, 40 runs of being out for a certain time frame, he'd do his anchor to get to that sort of state. And then he'd sort of, and he had his best season. He emailed me saying that he'd kicked on and turned those 40s to 80s and 100s. So the key, maybe 3 or 4 times, then test it, see if it's the right. The person says, I don't feel any different, then inquire, is it the right state, for the right time, and so on and so forth. And then really you want to go in vivo and do practical stuff. So you see me with my sports people, stuff with sports people, we go as live as you can. Or role play, interview will do a role play, or meeting will do a role play, to sort of test that out to get in the right state going forward. So, for example, if I'm going to work with Brent on radio, I'll pretend to actually be on. I might bring my headphones in, or bring you to my studio, the studio I work at, or the one that you're at, and sort of, go as close to live as we can to test it going forward, and obviously bring them back in the room, test future pace. And they're the sort of key things we'll do. But I'm going to sort of guide you through a script process that you can use after the break, and we'll sort of work on that. So on that note, you're probably at this point anchored to what you're going to choose for lunch. So if we break till 12:30, 1:30, is that okay for everybody? Is that give you plenty of time to do your eat whatever you've got to do at lunchtime? It's a good hour to just freshen your memory, and then we'll do a practice. I'll demonstrate, and then you can practice in pairs and